Imagine for a moment that everything you were ever told about one of the most iconic events in human history, the Crucifixion, might not be the complete story. Imagine that beneath the surface of faith, symbolism, and centuries of doctrine lies a truth so profound, so unsettling that it has been hidden in plain sight. What if the crucifixion was never about pain and punishment, but about power, transformation, and the eternal struggle between light and shadow within the human soul? Today, we are going to journey far beyond the boundaries of traditional belief. We will step into the forbidden corridors of history, mysticism, and ancient symbolism to uncover the dark secret behind the crucifixion. And the last revelation, the one we'll reach by the end, is perhaps the most powerful of all, because it might completely change the way you understand not only the story of Christ, but the story of humanity itself. Before we begin, if you are drawn to the hidden truths of the universe, if you believe that wisdom transcends dogma and that the divine speaks in symbols, then make sure to subscribe to this channel, leave your like, and share this video with others who seek the deeper mysteries of existence, because what we are about to reveal could shift your perception forever. Now, let us begin. The crucifixion has long been portrayed as the ultimate act of suffering and sacrifice, the moment when the Son of God bore the weight of humanity's sins. Yet, to the ancient initiates, to the mystics of Alexandria, to the followers of the Hermetic tradition and the Gnostics who read beyond the literal, this story held a far deeper meaning. They believed it was never about the death of one man, but the symbolic death of ignorance itself. To them, the cross was not merely a tool of torture, it was a key, a cosmic symbol representing the intersection of the material and the spiritual, the temporal and the eternal. In the esoteric understanding, the horizontal beam of the cross represents the physical plane, the finite world of form, limitation, and mortality. The vertical beam represents the divine axis, the infinite line of spirit connecting humanity to the source of all creation. And at their intersection lies the crucified one, the human soul caught between matter and divinity, suffering not for sin, but for separation. This idea, whispered among the early mystics, was both beautiful and dangerous, because it suggested that the true resurrection was not a historical event, but a process within every human being, the awakening of the Christ consciousness, the realization of the divine nature that sleeps within. And this perhaps was the first secret that was deliberately obscured by the rising orthodoxy. The idea that divinity is not exclusive, but universal, that each of us carries within the same spark that was symbolized in the man nailed to the cross. But why would such a truth be hidden? Why would an idea of inner divinity be replaced by a doctrine of guilt, suffering, and salvation only through external faith? To answer this, we must look to the centuries following the crucifixion, when spiritual knowledge was being translated into control. The early church, in its quest for unity and authority, began to transform living symbols into dogmas and personal awakening into institutional obedience. The mystics who spoke of the divine within were silenced, their writings destroyed or branded heresy. Think of the Gnostics, the Essenes, the Hermetic philosophers, those who believed that the cross symbolized not death, but the alchemical crucible in which the lower self is dissolved to reveal the divine gold within. They taught that the crucifixion was a metaphor for initiation, the descent into the depths of the soul, the death of the ego, and the rebirth of spirit. Yet their message was buried under centuries of literalism until only fragments of their wisdom remained. Have you ever wondered why the story of the crucifixion evokes such deep emotion, sorrow, awe, reverence, even for those outside the Christian faith? Perhaps because at its core it speaks to something archetypal within us. Every human soul experiences its own crucifixion, the moment when the illusions of the world collapse, when our attachments are stripped away, when we are forced to confront the shadow within. And through that inner death, something divine awakens, something eternal. Carl Jung once wrote that no tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. This psychological insight mirrors the same principle hidden in the cross, that only through the darkness of suffering can we access the light of transcendence. The crucifixion, in this sense, is not a tragedy, but a map, a sacred diagram of spiritual transformation, encoded in myth. Yet there is another layer, darker still, one that few dare to confront. For if the cross symbolizes both oppression and awakening, then it also reveals the eternal conflict between those who seek to awaken humanity and those who seek to keep it asleep. Some scholars of the occult suggest that the physical crucifixion was not only a symbol of sacrifice, but also an ancient ritual act, a public demonstration of power by the earthly forces that feared spiritual liberation, to bind spirit to matter, to silence those who spoke of inner divinity. But here is the paradox. What was meant to silence became the very symbol of awakening. The cross, intended as an instrument of control, became the greatest emblem of transcendence. The dark secret is that even in the act of suppression, the divine truth could not be destroyed. It was encoded, hidden, and passed down through symbols, waiting for those with eyes to see and hearts to understand. So ask yourself, what if the crucifixion was not the end of a story but the beginning of one? What if the resurrection was not a miracle of flesh, but a revelation of consciousness? In the next part, we will delve deeper into how ancient mystery schools, Hermetic philosophers, and early Gnostics interpreted the crucifixion as a hidden initiatory rite, and how this understanding was systematically erased from history. Imagine walking through the ancient streets of Alexandria, the crossroads of wisdom, where scrolls from Egypt, Greece, and the East filled vast libraries with secrets of the cosmos. In those candlelit chambers, philosophers whispered that the story of the crucifixion was not merely a record of one man's death, but an allegory written in the universal language of the mysteries, a code that spoke of the soul's transformation from darkness into light. In the teachings of the ancient mystery schools, from Egypt to Eleusis, from the Hermetic temples of Thoth to the initiations of Isis, the concept of death and rebirth was central. Every initiate had to symbolically die before being spiritually reborn. This was not a physical death, but the death of ignorance, of illusion, of the false self that clings to matter. And those who passed through this sacred process emerged transformed, awakened to the divine spark within them. When you look at the crucifixion through this ancient lens, something remarkable emerges. The cross itself becomes the symbol of initiation, and the 3 days of darkness before resurrection mirror the 3 stages of alchemical transformation: nigredo, the blackening, the dissolution of the ego; albedo, the whitening, purification through understanding; and rubedo, the reddening, the illumination of spirit. To the alchemist, this was not just a chemical process, but the journey of the soul itself. The early Gnostic texts, such as those found at Nag Hammadi, reveal a Christ who speaks not of sin and punishment, but of knowledge, gnosis, as the path to salvation. In the Gospel of Thomas, he says, "Whoever drinks from my mouth will become as I am, and I shall become that person." This is not a statement of separation, but of unity. The divine is not external, but mirrored within. However, this understanding was dangerous. It threatened the very foundation of institutional religion, because if every soul carries the spark of the divine, if salvation comes through awakening and not obedience, then no hierarchy can claim ownership over God. The early church understood the power of this revelation and sought to control it. What was once an inner path became an outer system. The living mystery became a dogma written in stone. The Gnostics spoke of 2 forces at war: the archons, rulers of illusion who sought to keep humanity bound to ignorance, and the pneumatics, souls who remembered their divine origin. To them, the crucifixion symbolized this very struggle, the cosmic conflict between the forces that liberate consciousness and those that enslave it. The Christ figure represented the awakened soul, crucified by the world of illusion, yet rising beyond it through gnosis. Even the symbol of the crown of thorns holds hidden meaning. Thorns represent the pain of material existence, the suffering that surrounds the human mind. The crown, placed upon the head, becomes the symbol of enlightenment through suffering, the awakening of the mind to divine consciousness. What was meant as mockery in the physical narrative becomes a profound symbol in the spiritual one. Consider also the mysterious cry from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" To the literal mind, this is despair, but to the initiate, it is the final trial, the moment when the soul confronts absolute separation from the divine before awakening to unity. In that abyss of darkness, the last illusion dies, the illusion that God is something outside of oneself. And in that moment, resurrection begins. Hermetic philosophy, especially as expressed in the Corpus Hermeticum, teaches that the divine mind, or nous, is the source of all creation, and that man, being made in its image, possesses within him the capacity to ascend back to that source through knowledge and inner purification. When we apply this to the crucifixion, we see that the cross is not a defeat, but a gateway, a portal through which the soul transcends form and returns to its divine origin. This is why mystics across centuries, from Meister Eckhart to Jacob Boehme, echoed the same truth, that Christ must be crucified and resurrected within each of us. Boehme wrote that Christ's cross is the gate to the kingdom of light. He was not speaking of a wooden cross on a hill, but of the inner experience of transformation, the crucifixion of ego and the awakening of spirit. But here lies the dark secret, one that institutions feared above all. If every human being possesses the capacity for resurrection, if divinity resides within, then no external authority holds true power. The crucifixion, then, becomes not a symbol of submission, but of liberation. It reveals that the same light which shone in the Christ consciousness can ignite in every soul brave enough to face its own darkness. Ask yourself, have you ever felt that life itself seems to crucify you? That pain, loss, and disappointment nail you to a cross of your own making? What if those moments are not punishments, but invitations, sacred initiations into deeper awareness? Every suffering hides within it the seed of awakening. Every fall carries the possibility of resurrection. In the alchemical tradition, it is said that the gold is born in the fire, and so too is the awakened soul forged in the crucible of human experience. The darkness of the crucifixion is the darkness before dawn, the moment when all seems lost, just before light breaks through. But the story does not end here. There is still a deeper layer, one that takes us beyond symbolism and into the realm of cosmic truth. For hidden within the crucifixion lies a mystery that reaches far beyond one time, one place, or one person. It is a mystery of energy, vibration, and divine alignment, a secret that connects the geometry of the cross to the very structure of the universe itself. And in the next part, we will explore how the cross, the crucifixion, and the resurrection align with ancient cosmology, sacred geometry, and the energetic laws that govern creation, revealing that what happened on Calvary was not only a spiritual event, but a cosmic one. Ponder this. Could the crucifixion have been more than an earthly event? What if it was also a cosmic alignment, a reflection of divine order manifesting in the physical realm? Across ancient traditions, moments of great transformation on earth were believed to mirror movements of the heavens, as above, so below. The crucifixion, seen through the lens of Hermetic wisdom, was not simply the end of a prophet's life, but the enactment of a cosmic mystery, the alignment of spirit and matter at a specific frequency of divine consciousness. Throughout the ancient world, the cross existed long before Christianity. It appeared in Egyptian hieroglyphs as the Ankh, the key of life, in Babylon as the mark of Tammuz, in Hindu temples as the symbol of the four directions and the unity of the center. The cross was the universal glyph of creation, the point where heaven and earth converge. The horizontal beam represented the flow of energy across space and time, while the vertical axis signified the descent of spirit into matter. Where they met, at the heart, was the pulse of the divine, the human soul. When the figure of Christ was placed upon that cross, the ancients believed that a profound energetic act occurred. The body became the living axis mundi, the bridge between worlds. The blood spilled on the earth symbolized the descent of divine light into the densest realm of existence, sanctifying matter itself. The crucifixion thus became not a defeat, but the moment when spirit fully embraced the material world to redeem it from within. In the Hermetic view, every act in the physical realm carries a resonance in the unseen. The alignment of the cross and the position of the body upon it formed a sacred geometry, a pattern of energy that radiated through the ether. Mystics spoke of this as the vibration of Christ consciousness entering the planetary field. This is why, after the crucifixion, ancient mystics claimed to feel an energetic shift in the world, as though the very frequency of human consciousness had been recalibrated. Modern scholars like Rudolf Steiner and esoteric thinkers such as Manly P. Hall have echoed this idea. Steiner described the crucifixion as the mystery of Golgotha, a cosmic event that transformed not only humanity's destiny, but the spiritual fabric of the earth itself. Hall wrote that the cross is the supreme alchemical symbol, representing the fixation of spirit within matter. In both views, the crucifixion marks a turning point in the evolution of consciousness, when divine awareness became permanently woven into human experience. Look deeper into the geometry of the cross itself. Its proportions are not accidental. The vertical and horizontal lines create the ratio known as the golden section, the same divine proportion found in the spirals of galaxies, the petals of flowers, and the structure of the human body. This ratio, F/phi, is the mathematical fingerprint of creation. The cross, therefore, embodies the universal pattern that sustains life. When the Christ figure is placed at its center, it represents harmony restored, the rebalancing of cosmic order through the union of opposites. But what of the darkness that followed the crucifixion, the 3 hours when the sun was said to have been obscured? Ancient astronomers and mystics interpreted this as more than coincidence. They saw it as a celestial sign, the earth itself mourning, the cosmos participating in the sacred drama. Some esoteric traditions claim that during this time, an actual shift occurred within the Earth's magnetic and spiritual fields, marking the transition from one age to another, from the age of Aries, the ram of sacrifice, to the age of Pisces, the fish of compassion. This shift is reflected in the symbols of Christianity itself. The fish, the ichthys, became the secret emblem of early Christians, not merely because of its connection to the apostles, but because it represented the new astrological era, an age of spiritual awakening and inner transformation. The crucifixion, then, was the celestial doorway through which humanity entered a new cycle of consciousness. Every great teacher before Christ spoke of this same transformation: Osiris dismembered and reborn, Dionysus torn apart and resurrected, Mithras slain and risen. The pattern repeats across ages because it is a law of nature and spirit. Death is the prelude to rebirth, destruction the precondition for renewal. The crucifixion is the latest expression of this eternal truth, written not only in Scripture, but in the stars themselves. Yet beneath the divine geometry and cosmic order, there remains the shadow, the dark current that sought to distort this revelation. For if the crucifixion truly symbolized the merging of heaven and earth, it also exposed the forces that feed on division, ignorance, and fear. The act that was meant to unite became the very symbol used to separate. The message of inner divinity was replaced with dependence on external authority. The living mystery was buried beneath ritual and creed. This distortion was no accident. The Gnostics spoke of the archons, the rulers of the lower world, who sought to keep mankind blind to its true nature. They thrive on humanity's forgetfulness, on its willingness to worship the symbol while ignoring the essence. To the Gnostics, the crucifixion was the moment when the forces of light and darkness clashed openly, the attempt of the archons to extinguish the light of Gnosis and the victory of that light through resurrection. And here we encounter the paradox again. The very act of suppression gave rise to awakening. The energy released through the crucifixion, whether seen as symbolic or cosmic, became the seed of an unstoppable transformation. From that moment onward, humanity could never again fully forget its divine origin. The cross became an unconscious reminder of the inner Christ, the spark within each being waiting to be resurrected. Ask yourself, if the crucifixion truly mirrors a cosmic law, then what part of that law lives within you? What inner energies are nailed to your own cross of limitation, waiting to be liberated through awareness? Could your moments of deepest pain actually be the points of greatest alignment, when your soul is closest to transformation? The cross, then, is not only an external symbol of faith, it is the blueprint of consciousness itself. It calls to each soul, awaken, rise, remember. But there is still one final truth, the most powerful of all, hidden in the mystery of resurrection itself. What happened after the crucifixion was not simply a return to life, but the revelation of what life truly is. The resurrection, misunderstood as a miracle of the body, is in truth the unveiling of an eternal principle, that consciousness cannot die. In the final part, we will uncover the ultimate secret, the revelation that the resurrection was not the restoration of one man's life, but the awakening of divine life in all humanity. We will explore what this means for our world today, and how the same light that rose beyond the tomb can rise within you. Imagine standing at the threshold of dawn, the air heavy with silence, the tomb still sealed in shadow. For 3 days, the world had held its breath. The sun had vanished, faith had faltered, and all that was once certain had turned to dust. Yet from that very darkness, something eternal stirred. Not the mere return of life to a body, but the awakening of consciousness itself. This is the moment where the hidden mystery reveals its final truth. The resurrection was not an event to be remembered, but a state to be realized. For centuries, humanity has been taught to look outward for salvation, to see the resurrection as proof of divine power bestowed upon one being alone. But the esoteric wisdom passed down through the ages tells another story, that the resurrection is the inner awakening of the soul, the lifting of the veil of illusion, the remembrance of our immortal nature. The Christ did not rise for himself. He rose as a symbol of what every human spirit is destined to become. The mystics of every age have spoken of this same awakening. In the Gnostic texts, Christ says, "I am the light that is over all things. Split a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there." These words echo through time, reminding us that the divine presence is not confined to heaven or temple, but permeates every atom of existence. To awaken to this truth is to resurrect, to see with new eyes that there is no separation between the human and the divine. Throughout the ages, seekers have sought this same transformation. The yogi in meditation, the alchemist in his laboratory, the monk in silent prayer. All strive toward one goal, union with the eternal. In this union, death loses its meaning, and fear dissolves into understanding. The crucifixion then represents the death of ignorance, while the resurrection signifies the victory of consciousness. But here lies the dark secret, the one hidden behind centuries of interpretation. The resurrection was never meant to create followers. It was meant to awaken creators. Each of us carries within the same divine pattern, the same cross of transformation, the same potential to rise. The tragedy of history is that humanity was taught to worship the symbol instead of embodying the truth it represents. When Christ rose, according to the mystics, it was not the return of flesh, but the transfiguration of energy. His form became radiant, transcending the density of matter. To the esoteric philosophers, this was the ultimate alchemical act, the transformation of lead into gold, the lower into the higher, the finite into the infinite. The resurrection was the final initiation, demonstrating the eternal law that consciousness creates reality. Hermetic philosophy teaches that all is mind. Everything that exists, from the stars in the heavens to the thoughts within your mind, is a manifestation of the universal consciousness. The resurrection, viewed through this principle, becomes the ultimate revelation of that law. When the Christ consciousness realized its unity with the all, even death itself lost its hold. Matter yielded to spirit, illusion dissolved into truth. This understanding is echoed by the mystic poet Rumi, who wrote, "Don't grieve. Anything you lose comes round in another form." He was not speaking merely of comfort, but of the eternal dance of energy and form. The same law expressed in the resurrection. Nothing truly dies. It only changes its vibration. The crucifixion and resurrection together reveal this universal rhythm: descent and ascent, darkness and light, crucifixion and rebirth. Ask yourself, how many times have you been buried under your own fears, doubts, or failures? How many times have you believed it was the end, only to rise stronger, wiser, more awake? Every moment of despair hides within it a resurrection waiting to unfold. The tomb is not a place of death. It is the womb of transformation. The stone that seals it is the illusion of separation, and the light that breaks through is the awakening of divine awareness. The true resurrection, therefore, is not something that happened 2,000 years ago. It happens every moment a human soul remembers its own divinity. When you forgive where others hate, when you love despite the pain, when you rise after being broken, you are living the mystery of resurrection. The Christ consciousness is not a figure to worship, but a frequency to embody. This is why throughout history, the greatest spiritual teachers have said the same thing in different words. The kingdom of God is within you. It is not found in temples or scriptures, but in the silent knowing of the heart. The cross stands not on a hill, but within your own being, and every challenge you face is another nail, another chance to release, to transcend, to awaken. The dark secret behind the crucifixion is that it was never a story of death. It was a story of awakening, disguised in the language of suffering, so that only those with inner vision would see. Those who sought power took the symbol of liberation and turned it into a tool of control, teaching humanity to fear rather than to awaken. But the truth cannot be buried forever. The light always finds its way through the cracks. In our modern age, as consciousness expands and old systems begin to crumble, this truth is re-emerging. The resurrection is happening again, not to one man, but to all of humanity. Every awakened heart adds to the rising vibration of the planet. Every act of love resurrects the world a little more. The cross becomes the compass of transformation, its vertical line pointing to spirit, its horizontal line extending to all humanity. At their center lies the heart, the true resurrection point, the sacred balance of heaven and earth within you. The mystics say that when the heart opens fully, the veil of separation falls. The resurrected soul no longer sees enemies, divisions, or death, only the play of divine consciousness unfolding through infinite forms. This is the Christ state, the realization that all life is one, that every crucifixion carries within it the seed of resurrection, and that the ultimate redemption of humanity will come not through belief, but through awakening. So as you listen now, ask yourself, what part of you is still nailed to the cross of fear? What illusion keeps your light hidden? The moment you recognize it, the resurrection begins. The stone rolls away, not by divine intervention, but by your own awakening. The darkness of the tomb transforms into the light of realization, and from that light, a new world begins. The story of the crucifixion ends not in death, but in rebirth, not in sorrow, but in revelation. Its secret was never meant to be hidden forever, only to be rediscovered by those ready to see. The same divine power that lifted the Christ consciousness beyond death is the same force that breathes through you now. It whispers through your heartbeat, shines through your eyes, and waits patiently for you to remember. Because in the end, the cross was never a symbol of suffering. It was the map home. The resurrection was never an ending. It was the beginning of eternal life realized. And the dark secret behind the crucifixion is that you are not merely a witness to it. You are part of it. The mystery lives within you, waiting, always, to rise. Thanks for looking.